Okay, let's draw. So this is a concept sketch that came out of a previous video named Red Nose Troll Freeform Sketches. Feel free to look that up in the video library on the page. So I refined it with a COL-ERASE blue pencil so I could figure out all the tonal study and clean up the line work. And I would take that directly into Photoshop, scanned it in, and got rid of all the background chatter and noise and got essentially the line weight drawing out, converted it to Sepia, and then printed it directly to the paper. The great advantage of printing out your drawing to the media that you need to use is the fact that if you screw up this piece, there's more pieces to be made because you didn't ruin the original drawing. So you do the concept, you refine it, and then your possibilities are endless because you could print this out on anything essentially, right? It could be any media that will go through your printer. It could be watercolor paper, white, tan, gray. It doesn't matter. It's whatever will hold the medium that you want to use, because this could be a sepia pen brush, it could be a charcoal drawing, it could be a graphite drawing. It just keeps the freedom of the image that you've created into being recreated into any one of those mediums. And so it's just a fantastic way to work. And I always had that stigma of it has to be the original, and so I wouldn't let myself do it. And I'm kind of over that, and I just want to have powerful images. So now I'm just all about, let me just get this image out, and however I can get it out, I'll get it out. So the first thing you should be noticing about this piece is it looks more like a watercolor painting than it does an ink drawing. So what is it? Is it an ink drawing or is it a watercolor painting? Well, that's the awesome thing about this water-based sepia pen brush, is that it is essentially a loaded watercolor brush. It's loaded with a very rich sepia color watercolor. It's water-based ink. So what I decided was, when I discovered that, because of how wet it stayed, the first few concept sketches I did with it, I did this dragon, that's also a video that's in the video log, and that was my first time ever using it. I got smudges everywhere because it was just soaking wet, and then I realized, dude, you're painting with watercolor, just a really concentrated watercolor. So I was like, how do I take advantage of this to create better pieces? And I decided I needed two tools. I needed the pen brush itself, and I needed a watercolor brush, but I didn't want to lose the feel of using the pen and then kind of have to switch brain modes. So I got this watercolor pen brush that is essentially just a blank water, right, in the barrel of this blue pen, because it's just water in there. And so anytime I needed to use it like a paintbrush, I could grab the ink wash from a palette, which I mixed up. I unloaded the barrel into the three little areas of the palette, so I had like 3 different intensities of the sepia. I just did it with the actual sepia pen brush. I just kind of squeezed it into each one of those little areas and then added more or less water to each one, so I had like 3 extra colors. So it was like using 4 colors of the same brown ink. So what I'm doing is I'm taking advantage of the fact that it's like watercolor, and I'm going back and forth from the pen brush to the water brush. And when I establish part of the drawing by outlining an area, I'm also flooding the area like a watercolor, like filling that area with water, and then working the ink to the edges so that I can create the tone in each place. So the advantage of using the pen brush over just direct watercolor is that the sepia is a water-based ink, and so it's a lot richer, a lot higher concentration. Yes, you could get to this rich of a brown in watercolor, but it would take forever. So the advantage of the ink is that it's just a lot more concentrated, okay? That's why I just didn't do it in watercolor. So there's 2 things to see here. I'm painting and I'm drawing at the same time. So what does that mean? That's really confusing. I'm using the ink to do ink methods. I'm doing these cross contour lines. I'm adding texture to the volume of the hood, and I'm not doing it with a complete strength of the really dark of the pen brush. I'm using like a medium tone by getting the the brush wet with the medium brown that I mixed up in the palette on the side. So I'm not using the pen brush at full strength, otherwise it would just be like really, super contrasty. So I'm trying to take advantage of working translucently and then only using the very rich right out of the barrel of the Sepia pen brush for the very dark, or laying down a dark and then kind of bleeding it out with water to kind of create a gradient. So I really suggest that, one, you get this pen for yourself, two, that you experiment with it and see how it works. So when I lay down that skin texture, that's like a watercolor, right? And then I laid down that full strength right there. And inking, that would have been super graphic and it would lay down. But once I grabbed the water, it became a wet on wet watercolor technique, and I bled it out and it became a gradient. So what I need out of this tool is both the things that it can do. That it can act like watercolor and it can act like an inking tool for illustration type things, like cross contour and varied line. So what's varied line? So varied line is a line that goes from thick to thin, right? That gives the appearance of volume and form. And then the contour line is the same thing. The contour line moves across the broad side of a surface to show its movement or its motion. What direction is the folds heading? What directions is that little flourish moving in? And they're like pushing the viewer's eye around. So that's what those two kind of lines do. So right there, it's very graphic in illustration, the use of the pen tool, right? It's just the hard ink, it's just the hard line. There's no watercolor technique. So that's the great thing about mixed media pieces, is that you're not locked into this one singular tool. You can use a bunch of tools to make the image, which is a really great way to work. Also, it's very freeing. So I'm going through now and I'm doing the cleanup work where I'm getting harder edges on things and I'm building up more and more layers to get it more graphic. So I'm reestablishing the drawing after I've got a lot of the tonal stuff laid out. So that's why it's important to have had that full rendering in the blue pencil, because to my left off screen is that blue pencil drawing where I'm looking over and I'm checking the tones that I'd worked out with the pencil, and I'm looking back over at the painting. And yes, I'm calling it a painting because you can see there's so much paint work. It's less like a drawing and more like a painting. And I think there's a lot of people need to lose the stigma of what they're actually doing when they're making art. They need these titles like I'm doing illustration, or I'm doing a mixed media piece, or I'm doing a fine art piece, or who cares? You're just making art, so just make a piece, and who cares what it's called? Just make it and put it out there, right? So I'm using that cross contour line to kind of show the movement on the neck, show the movement under the eye, get the details in there. So it's graphic now. Right now it's illustration work, right? I'm getting all these hard lines, these clean edges, and I'm really refining, showing all the edges. I pulled out the brown colored pencil to kind of get myself some soft gradients, because I didn't want a chance re-wetting the area and losing the intensity of the ink that was already laid down, because this ink is very sensitive to water, and you can lay it back down and pick it up and move it around. And I didn't want to take that kind of chance. So anywhere I didn't want to lose, I went back with a colored pencil, like the brown colored pencil or the brown COL-ERASE. So now I'm trying to go back in and add highlight, and I picked up the charcoal pencil. I signed it a little too early, because I'm coming back with the pencil that's called Ginger Root, and it's like a mid-tone. It's just a little bit darker than the value of the paper, but it's not white. And so I want to build up a lot of that gnarly kind of troll knobby skin texture. It just gets it busier and gives it it gives it the impression of a lot of detail, and it's actually not. You saw me just hatch. So now I'm just going to clean up a little bit with the gradients and get everything a little softer, try to make it look like it's airbrushed even though it's not. So the thing I really hope that you take from this video is that you can use multiple tools to create an image, and you can not be afraid to lose that image because you can reproduce it. And you don't have to have a printer, you could have transfer paper, but don't be afraid to get a cleaned up concept that you can rework over and over again until you get it right. So I hope you do.
All right. Thanks for watching. Please like and follow the Clinton Millsap Artist Workshop page. Once you become a member of the page, you can also send in your artwork, get questions answered, message, and find out how to get help on anything you're working on. Once again, thanks.